Peter, how are you? It's really good to see you.
Great to see you, Hugo. You look well and happy.
Likewise, my friend. I'm really glad that you're with me and Destino today. I brought you so we can talk about you, your work, and celebrate all the things that you have going on right now. But before we get started, I always do rapid fire questions to get us warmed up. Is that okay?
Sounds great. Let's go for it.
I would love to know for you when you were younger, what was the first character on TV or film that you really identified with?
Oh, wow. Well, I was one of those kids. I was raised in the late 50s. That's pretty old for your audience, but I would watch television from sunrise to sunset. I'd watch everything I get my hands on. And I used to love those old family sitcoms, everything from Father Knows Best to Ozzie and Harriet and all those great shows back then. And I used to love watching those families. And I would usually relate to those young boys that had relationships with their fathers that I would aspire towards. So the character that Paul Peterson played in the Donna Reed show was the first character that I remember thinking, boy, do I wish I could be him.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, to me, one of the things that bonded me and my dad was also, watching things like Happy Days and just those like type of family things that we just were able to enjoy it universally. Didn't matter what age you were. Uh,
Absolutely right. The difference between Father Knows Best and Happy Days is that I actually worked on Happy Days. So that's how old I am.
um, how do you keep your creative spark and what inspires you?
Mm. I love television. I've always loved television for as long as I've been alive. So what inspires me most are the talent. It's the talent that makes great television. The actors, the directors, the writers, the producers, the people that actually have the capacity and the ability to make great, compelling television are the people that inspire me the most. They really do. I mean, that's the reason why I think I'm best served as being and best suited to be an executive, somebody who helps to catalyze and put people together and platform them to do their best work. So I am inspired by great television, by television that moves me, that makes me laugh, that makes me cry, and those people that actually are the genius behind those that actually can make it.
I agree with you. And in preparation for this conversation, I did get to talk to a lot of those creatives, so I'll be sharing messages from them throughout. Um, lastly, lastly, if we were to switch places and you could interview anybody you would like, who would that be and why?
The first person that comes to my mind is Norman Lear, who I actually was privileged to have had a relationship with him when he was alive. Um, I thought he was brilliant, one of the greatest television minds of all time, whose ability to write stories and present characters that were so vulnerable and real and three dimensional um, that they had an ability to move, as you pointed out, universal audiences, audiences of all ages, of all color, of all creed, of all religion. They knew no bounds with the characters that he created because they were so relatable. And it was usually their vulnerability and their failings that I think we all related to the most. So the person that I loved talking to and that I was most inspired by, I think, was Norman Lear. And may he rest in peace.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you mentioned him. And he's, like you said, he's just an inspiration to everybody and how he brought his personalities all to his shows and really made us connect with him. Well, I did
Yes.
get to speak to one of our mutual friends, Don Foster, and he wanted to say this message to you to
Ah,
open up the conversation. He says, Peter Roth is an inspiration in a business awash in fear, impatience, and greed. Peter never fails to practice kindness, gratitude, and joy. The fact that I can say I worked with him for 15 years on several shows across two studios rather than worked for him attests to his unique ability to make everyone on the lot feel not just appreciated and valued for their work, but also for their humanity. Peter's not just one of the good guys, he might be
Mm.
just the very best.
Oh, oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate your sharing that with me. You know, Don Foster, I'm not sure that I can be quite as eloquent or speak as beautifully about him as he is and has about me. But I love Don Foster. Don Foster represents exactly what I'm talking about. That brilliantly creative, joyful human being who loved to laugh and who loved to tell stories about people whose foibles and failings were as much a part of who they were as their heroism. You know, he created characters that were relatable, that were real, that were dimensional, and that we could all relate to. And I think that's part of the reason why I thought he was such a and is such a wonderful, wonderful writer. Um, Off camera, he too is one of the kindest, most generous, most remarkable human beings I've ever known. Selfless to a fault, one of the hardest working people I know, and somebody who really, really cared about the quality of execution of each of the shows that he worked on. And I loved him for that. He's a very, very unusual and unique and extraordinary man.
And you did get to work with many, many creatives from your career. I'd love to mention that you were the chairman and chief executive officer of Warner Brothers Television from 1999 to 2021. And under you, you had several overall deals with creatives like Chuck Lorre, Michael Patrick King, Greg Berlanti, Ava DuVernay, just a few, and as well as 32 series went to 100 episodes. So how does that make you feel?
Mm. Well, that was one of my proudest achievements, to be associated with those series that were so popular and so resonated with audiences. They were able to stay on the air for 5+ years. You know, the accomplishment and the landmark of 100 episodes was quite a milestone, and one that we all of the executives that worked at Warner Brothers aspired to achieve. And to have 32 series during my tenure reach that milestone landmark was very, very meaningful for me because it measured not only popularity, but true great total success. You know, characters and stories again that really, really spoke to audiences around the world. So that was perhaps my proudest accomplishment.
Definitely, and we miss those days, especially now that, not a lot of shows get to reach that.
Mm.
And we look back on those days very fondly. Well, Peter, you're known to being very busy and your enthusiastic energy. So I would love to know what's occupying your creative mind right now. What are you really passionate about?
Well, since I left Warner Brothers at the end of 2020, um, my life has changed immeasurably, and I believe for the better. I've never felt happier nor more fulfilled. And that's because I'm now devoting my energies and time to my family, to my friends, to my faith, and maybe as importantly, to being of service. So, what occupies my time now are three distinctly different areas. First, travel. I am so fortunate to have been married to the woman of my dreams, to my college sweetheart. We've been married for almost 53 years in December. She is the love of my life and my best friend, and I now have time to be able to share with her in travel. So we have been traveling a tremendous amount, at least 8 to 10 trips a year for each of the past 5 years, and that has been fulfilling and invigorating both for my mind and my soul. So that's inspired a lot of creativity. Secondly, that when I'm in Los Angeles, I have breakfasts and lunches every day with people in the industry with whom I was so fortunate to work. So that's everything from actors to directors to producers to writers to executives. And I find myself both listening deeply and whenever I can, offering advice and counsel in whatever way I can to help enable that person to be the best that they're capable of being. So that's been very, very significant and fulfilling for me. And then lastly, I've involved myself with certain key projects. I sit on the board of Ava DuVernay's company, Array. I'm the chairman of the Hollywood Walk of Fame Selection Committee. I sit on the Television Academy Hall of Fame Selection Committee. And maybe most meaningfully, when I left Warner Brothers, J.J. Abrams, Greg Berlanti, Ava DuVernay, and Chuck Lorre gave me the greatest gift I've ever gotten, which was they endowed in perpetuity an internship program sponsored through the Paley Center in my name. And what it is essentially is it's a paid internship for rising junior and senior college students, primarily those that are less fortunate or are those that have not had opportunities that might have otherwise been afforded to others, those with particularly with diverse backgrounds, opportunities to be introduced to the best creative and business minds in all of television. We've now had 4 cohorts. We've graduated 4 cohorts of 20 students. So we've graduated 80 students. We're just about to start our 5th cohort. And that has been an extraordinarily fulfilling and memorable time for me. I find myself doing lectures with them. I do 2 lectures a year. And then we invite the likes of J.J. Abrams and Greg Berlanti and Ava DuVernay to speak, and Chuck Lorre to speak to the students and to give them insights and information that will help them realize their dreams. So that's how I've been occupying my time. Sorry for being so long-winded.
Oh, I love to hear it. And that's what is really filling to me as well, just to be able to give that inspiration similar to you gave to me back when I got started. I like to inject that to the young
As you gave to me.
creatives. Thank you. How can people sign up for an internship like this?
Well, again, the prerequisites are that you have to be a college student, a rising junior or senior. And then beyond that, there are no restrictions whatsoever. There are no, other than that, just you have to, as you're a college student in your junior or senior year, you can apply through the Paley Center. And again, we try to favor most principally those with diverse backgrounds, those less fortunate, those that, again, arguably need more of an opportunity than others. And so we try to favor those students. It's very competitive, I will tell you, but the quality and the minds and hearts of these students have so inspired me. I've been blown away by how incredibly talented and creative and passionate and remarkable they are. So it's a program that I urge you all of your listeners to consider if they are in college, if they are rising juniors and seniors, and if they have a passion to fulfill their careers in television.
What is the things that you love to teach, and what is the biggest takeaway from everybody that participates?
Well, that's a great question. I love teaching everything. It's one of the more fulfilling elements of my job. I loved finding teachable moments to those with whom I was able to work. I think the 2 things that I try to impart on the students mostly are, 1, the importance of focus. It's hard when you're young to know exactly what it is that you want to do, or what you're going to be. I try to help them all to focus on their greatest talents. And then secondly, I guess I try to impart upon each of them the importance of passion. Doing what you love to do is half the battle. And everybody who applies to that particular internship, and I would assume those that are listening to this podcast, love television, love entertainment, love the opportunity, the idea of being able to work in an area that you dream about, that you love, that's fulfilling for you. And so I try to remind them all of the importance of that passion. I mean, I had it when I was a kid. When I was a kid growing up in the suburbs of New York City, watching television was a dream for me. I loved all forms of entertainment. I wanted to work in Broadway. That was my initial goal. But then I realized, my greatest destiny, I think, lies in television. Because after all, I was watching television from the time I can remember, literally from my first memory. And I loved being transported and transfixed by characters and taken to places that I wished that I could go. So my feeling is, by simply just tapping into the passion within me, I was able to reach all of my goals. And I would urge the same to each of your listeners, and I try to impart that to all of the students and the cohort at the Paley Center.
You did mention Chuck Lorre, and he's one of your top collaborators. You met him in
He
1993 while
is.
working at Fox. And what was the thing
I
that
did.
stood out to you about Chuck Lorre that made you want to sign a deal with him as soon as you arrived to Warner Brothers?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, that's a great question. I've actually spoken about this publicly before, but I'll share with your listeners the story. It was 1993. I was the president of 20th Century Fox Television, where we were doing very, very well in all of our drama programs. We had Picket Fences, the Emmy Award-winning best drama. We had The X-Files, was my most passionate project. That was my baby. We had Chicago Hope. We had many, many LA Law. We had some big, big, big drama hits. We had very few comedy hits. So my boss challenged me and said, you guys do very well in drama, but you're not very good or successful in comedy. What are you going to do about that? So I was inspired by that challenge, and I made a list of what I consider to be the best comedy creators and showrunners in all of television back in 1993. And the number one person on my list, it was a list of 7 people, was Chuck Lorre. And the reason, Hugo, that Chuck was number one on my list was because I had read, I got my hands on anything and everything that he had written, from Sybil to Grace Under Fire to to the work that he did on Roseanne. I had read his scripts and I loved them. I thought, this man is hilarious. He's incredibly funny, but more than that, he finds and captures character as vividly as anybody as I've seen. And so, to make a long story short, I made a deal with him back in 1993. And I made a 3-year deal with him at 20th Century Fox Television. And for 2 years of those 3 years, unfortunately, we had very, very little success together. He created a number of different shows, but they just didn't catch on. And in the final year of our deal, he created a show called Dharma and Greg, which went on to pay for not only Chuck's deal, but every deal that I made at all of 20th Century Fox Television. So we made a fortune. It was a huge hit for us. So then in 1999, when I joined Warner Brothers, the first thing that I said to my bosses was, we must make a deal with my old friend, Chuck Lorre. And so we did. We made a 4-year deal with him from 1999 to 2003. And for 3 of those 4 years, Hugo, he had nothing but failure. He would be the first one to admit it. Failure after failure after failure. Nothing was hitting. And then, just as happened at 20th Century Fox Television, in the final year of his contract, after a great deal of patience and stick-to-itiveness and passion and never saying die, he created a show called 2.5 Men, which went on to make billions of dollars for our company, one of the most recognized, awarded, accredited, and ballyhooed comedy series of all time, which then led to The Big Bang Theory, and then Mike and Molly, and Mom, and The Kaminsky Method, and Young Sheldon. And it has been the greatest, most lucrative, most wonderful association and partnership that I have ever had in my career.
That's one of my favorite stories that you've mentioned to me before, and I did want to share it here. And I did find a quote from Chuck, and he said this about you. He said, "Without Peter, I'm done, and there's nothing. Peter comes from love, love for making TV, and for those who also make it. There's no other person more loving to work for. Peter lets humanity come through." So how does that make you feel from coming from one of your good collaborators?
it moved me to my soul. Um, Chuck is not only one of my longest term and most successful partners, he's also a very, very dear personal friend. He and I have been through a lot together, and I love him. He, you know, I'll say back to him what he said about me. Without him, I'm done. So he is just a brilliant, brilliant man. One of the hardest working, one of the most talented, one of the most insightful, and one of the most vulnerable human beings I've ever met. You know, he's not afraid to expose himself. You know, and to expose all of his foibles and all of his failings and all of his vulnerability. And again, that's why I think people are so moved and so touched by the characters and the comedy that he creates. So, but I will tell you that that quote is extraordinary. Thank you very much for sharing that with me.
Absolutely. I mean, you're known for cultivating relationships and especially with the studio and the talent. So what would you say is a crucial thing to get their trust?
Um, Passion. You know, I think that first of all, again, as I said, as I mentioned earlier, in my job, the single most important thing in my job by far, far more than finance, administration, distribution, far more than any ancillary division that supported the product that we made, by far the single most important element of my job and thing about my job was to bring in, to court, to nurture, and to platform talent to do their best work. Because as Shakespeare once said, the play is the thing. So um, I knew from the very beginning of my career that it was those that made the television, those craftspeople, those actors, those directors, those writers, those producers, those crew people, the people that actually made the product were, for me, the superstars. They were the people that I respected and admired the most. So embracing that was it was simple. It was so obvious. It's the thing that's missing in the industry today. Nurturing talent, as I was, enabled the talent to feel very comfortable in my presence. Do you know? I mean, they knew that I really loved what they did, and I loved who they were and the work that they did. So that's not a hard thing to be to feel good about, I suppose. So that's what enabled me to have such great relationships. I was passionate about the work. I insisted on being and doing only the best that we were capable of doing, because that is, after all, the true meaning of success. You know, the ability to do the very best work of which you're capable. That is the true meaning of success. And so I pushed people hard to do their best work. I tried to platform them to succeed in every way that I knew how. I tried to surround them with the best people and talent and money that could support them. And that enabled us to have good, strong working relationships.
Absolutely. And people from top to bottom all share a special Peter Roth story. And we all remember you very fondly, including Reno Wilson, who told me, he says this, they don't make him like Peter anymore. His attention to detail and his humanity is unmatched. He would write us handwritten personal notes when we got a pickup and holidays. You really felt the love for you and the craft. He's a great man and a legend. Yeah, this was
Oh,
something that I was able to collect all throughout, and just I thought it was very interesting that no matter who I spoke to, they had a very personal, detailed experience and message for you.
I can't tell you how moved I am by these beautiful messages. Thank you so much, Reno. Thank you, Chuck. Thank you, Don, and thank you, Hugo, for bringing these extraordinary talents together and for saying such lovely things. I'm so deeply moved by that. Thank you. I feel the same way about each and every one of them. their kindness, their humanity, their hard work, their talent is just it's immeasurable, and it means the world to me that they would say such nice things. So thank you for sharing them.
Absolutely. And I did want to start talking about how do you handle any challenges with the show or struggles or when they're facing some kind of crisis. Can you share an example of how you stepped in and how you wanted to contribute to make sure they get back on the right path?
Hmm. Well, because I'm a passionate guy, I think, and anybody who knows me, and certainly the executives and the talent with whom I was again so fortunate to work, they knew that when things went wrong, I took it to heart. I took it quite personally. It was hard for me to endure difficult times, and yet um, I think that in times of trouble, what I tried to do most was focus on the task at hand, on the problem, on the specific issue, whether it was a casting issue, a script issue, a network issue, a broadcast, an executive that was having trouble understanding and appreciating that the work that we were doing. I tried to again focus in as clearly and as vividly as I could on the problem, and then attack it with every ounce of energy I had. And again, I had the benefit of working with some outstanding executives who would often calm me down, give me perspective, give me a point of view that I hadn't considered, help me to focus my energies on helping to solve the problem, as opposed to making the problem worse. You know, I can't think of a specific issue, but along with the love and the passion that you feel in wanting to produce the best television, comes that same passionate feeling about how do you handle a problem. It's hard. It hurts. You feel it really, really deeply, and you try to address it in as positive a way as you possibly can. You know, um, there is one story. I don't know why this story comes to my mind. It was early on in my career. I was working on a show called Who's the Boss? A show back in 1984 starring Tony Danza and Judith Light and Alyssa Milano, among other people. And I loved the show. And I remember I was the head of current programming. That is, I was in charge of the dramas and comedies that were on the ABC schedule at the time. And I remember the two executive producers, Marty Cohen and Blake Hunter, presented me with an idea for an episode, and I hated it. I thought it was terrible. In my own myopic, very personal, very non-objective way. And so I said, I brought them into my office and I said, fellas, I'm just not feeling this episode at all. Let me, if I could, share with you an idea that's based and inspired by yours that I think might help to make it a more successful episode. So I pitched them this idea. They were very, very gracious, very enthusiastic. That's a great idea, Peter. They went off, they wrote the script, they turned it into me, and it was worse than the original idea. It was terrible. And it made me realize this is why I'm not a writer. And I was wrong in my criticism. I was really wrong. And so I said to them, I called them up, I said, fellas, I did you a terrible, terrible disservice. I tried to impose my will on you. You are the writers. You're the producer. I'm merely an executive. I'm an audience member. I had no right to pitch to you this idea, and yet I did. You did the best that you could do to make it work, and frankly, it's worse. We're going back to your original idea, and that was the idea that went on the air. And it was a very valuable lesson for me. And I suppose how to solve a problem, one that I created myself, and in the importance of allowing the talent to have the final word as to what's most resonant for an audience. I think it's a bit of a lost art from many executives these days. Anyway, that's terribly self-serving. I apologize for that, but there you go.
No, I love to hear these behind the scenes stories that us as viewers don't really get to hear. And it's a testament of how you like to work as well, that you recognize and that you give their place to the creatives that you hire and you work with.
Yeah, that's the most important lesson that I learned over the years is that number one, that the play is the thing. Again, not to requote Shakespeare, but that it's all about the quality and execution of the idea and the product. The show, I hate the word product. It's about of the series. It's all about the quality of the writing, the quality of the acting, the quality of the directing, the quality of the execution. That is most important, and honoring the talent that makes it is vitally important. Making sure that you have the ability to find the best talent, to support them, and to make them and to give them the freedom to do their best work. That's the way you succeed.
Well, one of my favorite times to being around you and then working with you was in 2014. I remember you helped usher the Chuck Lorre universe, and there was about four shows being shot in an area of Warner Brothers. Us crew, we used to call it Chuck Lorre Land because it was Two and a Half Men and Big
Yeah.
Bang Theory and Mike and Molly and Mom. So what would
Yes.
you say is the thing from a Chuck show that really gravitates to an audience that makes them feel so connected to the show?
Again, I think as I mentioned, Chuck, first of all, Chuck has a God given talent. He's a brilliant writer. And I think the element of his craft that I think is most vivid is his ability to tell great stories, simple, powerful, character based stories in 22 minutes. Remember, in days of broadcast television, that's all we had. It was 22 minutes to tell a story. His ability to hone and to shape characters that were so vivid to an audience, so clear to an audience, that the audience could laugh anticipatorily at almost anything that they would say. So that when the character of Sheldon, as an example, would literally just look at the camera, you would laugh in anticipation because you knew exactly what the character was feeling, which was a testament to Chuck, that his ability to hone and shape and create a character that was so vivid and so clear and so three-dimensional, and his ability to tell stories about those characters that were so deeply relatable. So the thing about Chuck that is the commonality of Chuck is the vulnerability of the characters, the dysfunctional relationship between Charlie Harper and his mother, to have the character of Leonard find and fall in love with and have reciprocated the love of Penny. I mean, as I think I've said before, if a character like Leonard Hofstadter could find and fall in love with a character like Penny and she could love him back, then there's hope for us all. So the point is that these characters are very vulnerable, very real, very three-dimensional, very frail, and very honest and honorable. Same thing with Mom, the character. Here's a story about dysfunctional relationship between a mother and a daughter and a granddaughter. And it all began with Alcoholics Anonymous. Same thing with Mike and Molly, Overeating Anonymous. These are all characters that are so real and vulnerable. Um, and Chuck's ability to tap into that and to create characters that embody those elements, I think audiences find that very reassuring, very relatable, and very comfortable. So, again, I'm sorry, there's my long winded answer for what distinguishes Chuck. And Chuck is in a class, but Chuck will go down along with Norman Lear as the greatest comedy creator and showrunner in the history of the medium.
Yeah, it's very understandable with your answer. I mean, there's such a wide library to pull from. And like you said, all those
Yeah.
shows were top tier. So to be able to talk about them to this day, and it's a great feeling to even be a small part of it for me.
Yeah.
We did meet on the set of Mike and Molly, and I can share from my experience, whenever you came to set, to me, it felt like a ray of sunlight. It felt like, I was seen, I was supported. What's the biggest thing that you've noticed for you, being a leader that leads with kindness and human connection? And I know it's like a weird question to ask, but that's not the normal experience that we've had with an executive.
Well, that's a terrible shame, Hugo. That because that should be the norm. I mean, treating all people with respect and dignity is something that should be in every workplace, in every business, and around. Unfortunately, that's not the case, particularly in with much of what's going on in our country today. But that should be the norm. That should not be a surprise. It pains me, honestly pains me, that that's not the norm. Um, I, again, because I loved what I did, and because I loved television, I loved being a part of making great television. I loved the people. I loved everybody involved, and offering a smile and a hug and support and affirmation to everybody working on these shows, to me, was the job. That's the job. That's the job. Is not to be critical, not to be ostracizing, not to put people down, but to build people up. That's, I believe, how people do their best work. And I will share with you one anecdote, a story that I remember very, very vividly. That was a real turning point in my career. It was a moment of failure for me, but I was able to see the light, if you will, not to be corny about it, through what was a very tough experience in my time. It was 1979. I had just been promoted from children's programming, where I began my career, into prime time. And I was very, very nervous. I really thought to myself, oh my God, what have I done? I'm in over my head. I don't know what I'm doing. I was filled with fear and with insecurity. And for about 2 months into my new job, I was head of drama development, current drama development for ABC. And I was so nervous. I would just sit in a corner and I didn't know what to say. And I was just filled with anxiety and self-doubt. And one day, my wife and I went to a Christmas party of the first primetime series that I worked on. It was called Eight Is Enough, a show that I absolutely loved. And it was a Christmas party that was held at the MGM commissary. Again, I'm the director of current drama for ABC. And my wife and I walk into this Christmas party. And as we walk in, it was as if the seas had parted. And I remember looking over my shoulder thinking, did the president of the network just walk in? I mean, why are all these people looking at us as if we were important? And I realized in that moment that what I represented was important. I represented the authority of the network. It wasn't about me. It was about the position that I held. And it occurred to me in that moment, what these people are looking for is simply affirmation of who they are. They just want to be seen. They want to be thanked. They want to be acknowledged. And so that night, I literally came out of my shell by going up to every person at that party and thanking them for their contribution towards the success of a series that I loved called Eight Is Enough. And in acknowledging others, it enabled me to come out of my own narcissism, my own self-doubt, and realize that the job was to bring out the best in others, not to be fearful about what I couldn't do myself. So it was a very, very important moment in my career and in my growth. And it was through failure, I think, that I learned the importance of acknowledging and embracing others. And hopefully, because in my career, I have found that that brings out the best. That affords the best success. The best results come from the happiest, the best, the most productive sets. So there you have it.
I absolutely agree, and I could only speak for myself, and that experience. I'm always going to be grateful to you and Chuck Lorre for letting me be a part of the show, Mike and Molly. I still have lifelong friends from that show, and like you said, it was life changing for me when a person like Peter Roth was acknowledging my talent, and a person like Melissa McCarthy inviting me to work on her feature, Tammy. It started to see myself at the time I was doing catering, and I stopped seeing myself as the guy in catering and more as an artist, and that my voice and my creativity mattered to these top tier talent. And so it made me really take my career seriously and want to deliver, especially if it's being invited to these projects. I wanted to deliver the best I could.
Because you do matter, Hugo, and because you did matter. And because you provided a service that brought joy and happiness to many, many people on the set. And look at that smile. You know, how can you not respond to that smile, that warmth and that kindness and that generosity of spirit? So the fact is that it was easy to recognize and to acknowledge you because you are a caring, kind, terrific human being. So you have worth, and I, as do I'm sure all of the listeners of your podcast. And the importance of remembering that and of acknowledging that and of recognizing that in others is a very, very important and winning formula. So,
Thank you. And I did get to speak to Billy Gardell and Melissa McCarthy
ah,
about you, and they both wanted to give a message to you while we were doing this conversation. Billy says, Peter is a great studio head that brings class, warmth, and genuine affection for creative success at the highest level. He's a man who inspired me every time I crossed his path. He understood better than anyone that being the bridge between the show and the business was the way to endure success for all. He literally is a bridge over troubled water. I
oh,
love him to death.
oh my
Uh,
God! Wow, that's beautiful. You're bringing tears to my eyes, man.
I got another one. I got Melissa
Oh,
McCarthy wanted to say this. She says, I worked for the wonderful Peter Roth for 13 delightful years. He taught me that true leadership can be delivered with kindness and joy. Peter felt like a friend to everyone. His smart and funny, kind heart made a huge impact, not just on my career, but how to navigate running a business and supporting a team. We need to clone him.
oh, wow. Oh my God, Melissa and Billy, thank you so much. That means so much to me. That's really beautiful. Thank you.
And for a lot of us, the table read day is the first day for the show's production. What is that like for you,
Oh,
and what do you like to bring to the table?
I loved table reads. Because again, look, executives make the mistake of truly believing that they know better than the talent that is actually producing the show. I find it troubling and sad. The fact of the matter is the job of the executive is to hire the right people and let them do their work. Now, it's not to say that I think the most important responsibility of an executive is to be the audience. The most important note that I ever gave was, I'm not sure that I understand what it is you're trying to accomplish in this scene. I don't feel like I'm caring nearly enough. Can you help me? That's a note that audiences, I believe, can relate to. But page one, this joke doesn't work. I don't know. It's not to say that there isn't value to that, I suppose, but to me, that's over noting. So to answer your question, Hugo, going to a table read was one of the most joyful days of them all because I never picked up the script. Normally at a table read, everybody sits there and reads the script, from the executives to the crew to the direct to the actors. The actors are reading this. What I tried to do is I would sit back and listen and watch and try to get a sense of the rhythms of the comedy. Is the comedy working? Am I laughing? Am I feeling something? Am I moved either to tears or, more importantly, to laughter? And so I tried to take in that whole process and that whole experience. And then afterwards, if I had any thoughts, I would share them with my executives, or I would go up to Chuck and I'd say, I'm not sure that that's, I'm not sure that I understand. And Chuck, who was so brilliant, who had the insight to know what was wrong well before anybody else. Again, he didn't need an executive to really tell him what was wrong. Not always, but for most of the time, that was the truth. So I find myself, I would say something to him, he'd say, I know, I'm going to fix it. Don't worry. And that's when you know you've hired the right person. That's a great executive producer. Anyway, table reads were a joyful experience for me. I loved them. I loved laughing. I loved them. And I went to every table read of every Chuck Lorre show. I rarely missed one. So, and those days that I did was because I had to be in New York for some corporate meeting, which I would have much preferred to have been at the table read, believe me.
Oh, I agree. I was lucky to be able to be part of the Big Bang Theory family towards the end, and like you said, that was an experience that I always loved to want to live in that moment because I knew it was so special, and I knew that I mean it may not happen again,
Yeah.
and just that crew alone to be part of that such top tier team was really beneficial to me. I did reach out to Melissa Rauch to see what her point of view was. She told me that Peter was, it's so great that you responded because it's exactly what she said to me. She said, Peter is one of the most genuine, wonderful humans I've had the pleasure of working with. And in addition to his kindness, he is absolutely brilliant. I always remember him sitting at the Big Bang table reads with his terrific laughter. He never had his nose in the script, rather sat there listening to the comedic rhythms, 100% attentive and engaged, always beautifully supportive. Peter truly cares about the people, about making great TV, and about the magic behind it. He always and forever will be family to me.
Oh,
You guys did, well, we all did 279 episodes of The Big Bang Theory, which is the most for a sitcom. And it's still one of the top watched shows today.
it is.
So you guys did reshoot the pilot twice.
Yeah.
What made
Once.
you
Yeah,
uh,
we did a pilot. There were issues with the pilot. Again, Chuck and Jimmy Burrows had the and CBS. I will Nina Tassler, who was the head of CBS at the time, had the foresight and the insight to know what needed to be fixed. Most especially Chuck and his writers. They made some significant changes, very significant changes. Reshot the pilot, and the rest is history.
when you read the first script for Big Bang, or when it was presented to you, what was so special that it was a no-brainer?
Well, wow, the first experience, my first experience with the Big Bang Theory was in a conference room at a building in Warner Brothers about almost a year before it actually went on the air. It was well before the first pilot had been shot, well before the script had been written. A script had been written, and what Chuck wanted to do, he wanted to try this out on me. He said, I just finished the script with Bill Prady. It's about these brilliant, socially inept scientists and the world that they live in. And it's a little bit of Beauty and the Geek. And I would love to read it to you. I'd like to perform it for you. I'd like to have a couple of actors perform it for you and my head of comedy, a guy named Len Goldstein. And so we went over to the conference room and we listened to the Big Bang Theory. It was filled with too many brilliant jokes, jokes of how smart these guys were. It was flawed. It was not perfect. there were not enough jokes, and most importantly, the characters weren't quite as vivid as they eventually became. It featured a female character that was hardly the loving, kind, beautiful girl next door that everybody wanted to be with in Penny. It featured a very different kind of character, um, a much tougher, more streetwise character. And so there were flaws within the script, but I remember listening to it. I didn't read it, I listened to it. And I was about to give some notes to Chuck afterwards. I said, I think we have maybe far too many brilliant jokes and not enough character. And he said, Peter, I literally was about to say to him, here's what I think. He said, you know what? I know what's wrong. Let me go fix it. But here's what I remember most vividly. I remember thinking to myself, if guys like this, as I said earlier, if guys like this could possibly have a chance, they are such nerds. They are so inept. They are so flawed, brilliant, but unable to figure out a tip and a check and how much of a tip to give to a waiter because there are so many variables. I mean, I thought these are characters unlike anything I've ever seen before. But my most profound thought was if these guys have a shot of having a friendship and a love affair with a character like a beautiful girl next door, then there is hope for us all. And I remember thinking that is fabulous. That's a great idea for a series. You know, that is literally Beauty and the Geek. So that was my greatest takeaway, thinking there's genius in this. So that was very, very, very early. That was one of the earliest incarnations of the series. And again, and Chuck knew exactly what to do. He fixed it, shot the first pilot, fixed it again, shot the second pilot, and that second pilot was magic. Indeed, it was magic. And by the way, Melissa Rauch, and when Melissa Rauch and Mayim Bialik joined the cast of The Big Bang Theory, of an already established, brilliantly realized group of actors and characters, the magic became undeniable. Unlike anything I'd ever seen. This was a group this is an ensemble of actors that was as good as any I have ever worked with in my career. They were that fabulous, all of them, each of them. So there you have it.
Yeah, I just remember being on that set and how they all, like everybody there just made it look so easy, and it's not.
Yeah.
And so it was just like this lightning in a bottle and such unmatched collaborations. So yeah, it was really joyful to be able to be inspired by all of that.
You know, when I first started my career in 1975, I'm really dating myself. I had the privilege of working with a man named Leonard Goldberg, I'm sure your listeners have heard of Aaron Spelling, but they were Spelling Goldberg Productions. And Leonard was one of my earliest mentors. And he said to me, Peter, kid, I'm going to teach you about television. Television, in its most fundamental form, is a close-up and a script. And what he meant by that was it's the confluence of great writing, great storytelling, great characters, with television is a close-up medium. The ability to bring an actor through a character into your living room in a way that is so intimate and so meaningful that audiences have a compelling experience that they never want to turn away from. That's television at its most fundamental truth. And by the way, as much as television has evolved and it's become so big and the small screen becomes a big screen, and as much as important as world building and great direction is, I'm reminded of the simplicity and the truth of that. That television is fundamentally a great actor and a great writer, and the confluence of that in great storytelling. And that's great television.
I wanted to turn my attention to your work with Array Crew. Uh, in February 2021, you helped launch Array Crew with Ava DuVernay, and this was to promote inclusion on sets. And you brought every studio in Hollywood to participate. So I'm grateful because you were able to bring me during the early stages. And again, you helped me feel seen and supported. Now that Array is fully running, what is one of the most memorable or proudest things that you've been able to experience with Array?
Well, where do I begin? Ava DuVernay is Ava DuVernay is Array, and Array is Ava DuVernay. Ava is brilliant, absolutely one of the most brilliant human beings, filmmakers, leaders I have ever had the privilege to work with. She inspires me every day. Her insight and her ability to understand the need to support those that wouldn't otherwise have opportunities it's positively inspiring, Hugo. It really is. And I had the privilege of meeting of meeting Ava with Oprah. I met them both at the same time, and I fell in love with both of them. And we did a series called Queen Sugar together, which began our relationship, which has been going on for north of 10 years now. I'm sorry, I can't talk about Array without talking about Ava. Array Crew is one of many, many, many initiatives that Ava has introduced to the world. Once again, it was a database. It was devised to give access to those crew members that otherwise wasn't being seen by those that were actually hiring crew. You know, for years we would hear the same excuse every year. Why are all the crews so singularly white? And the answer was, and people would say, well, I did the best I could. I tried to hire more, but I didn't know. Well, Ava took that idea and she said, you know what? Let's give these hiring managers opportunities to know and to have access to information about these below the line crew members. Let's provide information to the hiring managers so that they can't use that excuse. And that is exactly what she did. That was her idea. It was her genius. I simply helped support it from an executive perspective. I helped go to the other studios and ensure that they participated financially in embracing this idea because it was so important. And it has since been bought, absorbed through Impact, which is a worldwide global. It is now the world's greatest, largest database for diverse crew members in the world. So how can you not be inspired by that? So my involvement with that was, and it's because of Ava. It's all because of Ava. It was an inspiration. And most recently, she came up with another brilliant idea. It's called Array Play. And this is essentially, it's a portal. It's a virtual programming device that enables audiences through streaming to have access to independent filmmakers and films, principally produced by women and people of color. And it's sort of a codified portal and designed for those audiences specifically. And it's brilliant. It's a brilliant idea. When I heard about it from Ava, I said, anything I can do to help support you, I'm in. And now, as I think I mentioned, I sit on the board of her company. So in that capacity, I was able to support her. So everything that she does makes me proud. I'm proud to know her. I'm proud to have her as my colleague and my leader, and I'm proud to have her as my friend.
Absolutely. And I was able to join you on an event for Queen Sugar.
Yeah.
And it was very inspiring to be there because it was a celebration of Ava because she was able to open the door to so many female directors through this project. And it was an opportunity to be able to give back and also to give the gratitude of being able to start these careers that, like you said, otherwise they wouldn't have seen us. And how does that make you feel?
I feel okay. Well, this leads me to the best story of them all. In the first year of Queen Sugar, I had so much faith and belief and trust and confidence in Ava. She said to me, look, I want you to know that I'm going to only hire female directors to direct every episode of Queen Sugar. And while I thought it was a noble idea, I have to confess that it made me slightly nervous. I thought, are you sure? Are you sure that will enable us to realize the best crafted episodes? I mean, do we only want to singularly restrict ourselves only to women? And she said, Peter, trust me, I will make it work and I guarantee their success. When I heard those words, I said, done. That's done. Oprah did the same thing. Oprah gave the same, because Oprah, it was on the Oprah Winfrey Network. So she's, not only does she own it, she's in charge of it. So Ava needed both Oprah and my sanction to do that. We both enthusiastically gave it to her once she guaranteed their success. And it was the best, most informing, and most successful experiment I have ever been a part of in my career. It really opened my eyes. And Ava has done that many, many times with me on many different occasions, in many different circumstances. And frankly, I'm at a point now where I just say, you don't have to sell. Yes is the answer. You have an emphatic yes. So, yes, I am very, very proud of my association with Ava DuVernay. It's exceedingly so.
Wow, I love hearing these stories from you. Well, Peter, what made you want to work in entertainment?
Well, I think I answered that question. When I was a kid, I found myself taken to places that I never thought were possible, to experience relationships that I wish that I could have, to be introduced to comedy and laughter and tears and pathos and drama in ways that it just moved me to my soul. I loved watching television. I loved going to the movies. I loved seeing Broadway shows. I couldn't believe that people could actually make a living working in these medium. So it was no surprise to me growing up, as much as I had other interests in other areas of I don't know, success, I suppose. It was no surprise to me that entertainment was going to be my life stream. Once I discovered that it was possible to actually make a living, I decided this is what I'm going to do. And in fact, my first job in entertainment was in theater. I was a theater major where I met my wife in college. Did that for 3 years. The miracle in retrospect was that I was gainfully employed for 3 years. But after 3 years, I decided this is far too speculative a world. I need to do something that's a little bit more permanent and a little less speculative and uncertain. And so that's in 1975, I was introduced to a man who gave me my first job in television. And there you have it.
Well, Peter, how did you land on this career path? Because, like you said, it does take us a little bit of time to figure out how we want to contribute to filmmaking and television. What was the thing that made you realize what your role was going to be?
Again, I think that I always, my best destiny was as an audience member because I loved it so much, because I was so moved by it all, because it all was so meaningful to me as a viewer. It occurred to me that the best job for me was to be somebody that could catalyze and bring together talented people and have them create and perform and do their best work. So being an executive was always clear to me as my best. My first thought was to be a producer, but I thought to myself, you know what? I'm not sure that I'm the best producer. I think I'm a better executive. I think I'm better in a role in which I can be supportive of others and help them to realize their best destinies as filmmakers. So I knew pretty quickly that was the right role for me.
Early on, what did you learn from all your mentors, and who was your Peter Roth?
Oh my God, I had so many, Hugo. I mean, I'll name them quickly. Ira Barmack was the man who gave me my first job in television. I was taught and learned the importance of passion, compassion, and being kind to others. I then went to ABC. A woman by the name of Bonnie Dorr gave me my first job. I learned from her the importance of not being fearful. That you can be more successful coming from a place of strength of conviction than fear. In other words, saying yes is a far more powerful thing than saying no. Fred Silverman, who was legendary, iconic, arguably the greatest programmer in the history of broadcast television. I learned from him the importance of, again, following your passion and having the strength of your conviction. Stephen J. Cannell was one of my dearest, closest, greatest friends. From him, I learned the importance of being kind, being thoughtful, of being honest but sensitive. Marcy Carsey and Tom Werner. Marcy is still to this day one of my best friends, my closest friends. She was arguably the greatest executive with whom I've ever worked. I learned so much from her and from Tom Werner. And then finally, Bob Daly and Barry Meyer at Warner Brothers. They simply loved what they did. And I think what I learned from them was the importance of staying out of other people's way, not being an impediment, but being an additive, being a support system. So I learned all of these lessons from all of my mentors, and I've had so many, and I'm so fortunate to have had so many.
Yeah, I completely agree with you that, for me, it wasn't till I realized that I can have a career in this industry. And when I did get my first foot in the door was when I didn't feel like I was working anymore. It was just having fun with my creative friends and just loving what I did. That experience changed my life. Are you able to tell me an experience that changed your life?
Well, I think the experience that did change my life, I think I told you the story of when I was a frightened, self-absorbed, riddled with fear executive, when I first got into prime time, and that moment of realizing that my principal job was to acknowledge others. I think that was really important. I will tell you that, since you asked the question about being a mentor, I think what's most important is to all of your listeners is that when you do find success, when you do realize success, when you find achievement and realize the best of who you are, is the importance of paying it forward, of being a mentor to others, of being of service to others. Not only is that a gift, selflessness is a gift, but the ability to help support others as they're beginning their careers is very, very important, especially to those that are perhaps less fortunate, that don't have the same opportunities as others. We all have our own magic within us. Finding and help bring out the best in others it's a wonderful thing, and it's an important thing. And I urge all of you that when you are in a position to help others, to do so. So there you have it.
For those, like you said, that are just starting out or looking for guidance, what's the best way for them to network and meet the right people?
By doing your homework, by first reading everything you possibly can about the business, by watching every series you possibly can that's on television, by going to every movie that you possibly can, by constantly reading and educating yourself, by taking classes. If you're a writer, the most important thing to do is to write and then write and then write and then write again. There is nothing more important than working hard. And maybe this is a great way to end the podcast by telling you a story about how I began my career. Because I think it's emblematic of the importance of seizing opportunities, working very, very hard, and then making yourself as indispensable as you possibly can. So it was that story that I was going from theater into television. I was introduced to a man who introduced me to a man who was the head of television of a company called Filmways Television. This was a company that you probably don't know, but back in the 60s was responsible for shows like Beverly Hillbillies, Mr. Ed, Petticoat Junction, Green Acres. These were shows that were enormously popular. But in the mid 70s, they had nothing on the air and they were trying to resurrect themselves. Introduced to a man who was the head of television. I had a meeting with him. I was introduced to him. And to his surprise, because I was introduced by his boss, he liked me. He liked me more than I think he expected to. And he said to me, you know what? I'm going to take a shot with you. I'm going to give you a chance. I'm going to hire you as my assistant on a pilot that we're shooting in New York City. I was thrilled, Hugo. I was beyond excited. I thought, oh my God, this is my opportunity to get into television. Yay. Okay. Then what happens is 2 days later, I get a letter from him because in those days, there was no internet, there was no emailing, there was no texting. So I get a letter from him, not even a phone call, a letter saying, Dear Peter, you're a really nice kid. I really liked you a lot. I was hoping to be able to work with you, but unfortunately, my budgets have been slashed and I don't have the luxury of being able to hire you as my assistant. So sorry it didn't work out. Well, I was bereft. I was beside myself. I thought, oh my God, I had this opportunity and it's now been taken away from me. So I made a decision after talking with my wife. I made the decision to pick up the phone and call Ira Barmack and say to him, Ira, you don't understand. You have given me an opportunity to work for you where I can learn and I can grow and to be a part of television. I need this job. How about if I work for free? He said, in that case, you're hired. Now,
Wow.
I'm not suggesting to all of your listeners that they necessarily work for free. But when presented with an opportunity, I am suggested that you do whatever you can to get and seize that opportunity. And then the end of the story, Hugo, is that when I got that job, I was the first one on set and the last one to leave. Every single day, I would go to the local delicatessen across the street from the set in which we were filming, and I would get a dozen coffees on my own dime. I would buy 12 coffees, and I would go in, and as the crew started to come into the set, I would say, how do you take a coffee? And the cameraman would say to me, with milk and sugar. Who are you? And I would say, oh, I'm Peter. I work for Ira. He's the executive producer. Could you explain to me how the camera works? And so by making myself as indispensable as I possibly could to everybody, I tried to ingratiate myself to as many people as I could. I worked harder than everybody. Again, first one on the set, last one to leave. By the end of the run, my dream came true when Ira said to me, you know, I have to tell you, you have exceeded my expectations. I would like you to come work for me full-time as my assistant in California. And that is how my career began. Now, I will tell you that after he made this offer to me, I did stop for a second. I said, Ira, do you think, is it possible that I might be able to get paid this time? And he proceeded to give me a job that paid me twice what I was making as I was working in the theater. And that is how my career in television began.
Oh, I could totally resonate to that story. I could mimic what you said in that I, like you, I just wanted to be in that environment and know how I could contribute and be curious and be inspired by everybody around me. And sometimes that's all it takes, just being there. And a lot of the times that I did feel like giving up or looking for a different path, I was always reminded by my support that there's so many people that want to get through those gates and you're already here. So you giving up that spot is giving up on yourself. And so I always appreciate having those people to give me that guidance early on.
You want to be in the room where it happened, my friend.
Well, thank you, Peter. I really appreciate your time. I'm really glad and proud to call you a friend. And I look forward to seeing all the things that you produce moving forward.
You are a friend, Hugo. You're a great man. And what you're doing is of a great service to a lot of people. So I applaud you and I support you. And go Dodgers.
That's right. I'll see you at the game.
Okay, take care.